and it was an exclusive domain only of that great scholars. It was not available for everybody. Everybody could not access theory, or everybody could not do theory. So probably in few universities, or a few great universities only, the scholars thought that we were eligible to do theory. So that phase, and that phase falls between 1980s, 85s, 1990. So that moment was called moment of theory, when theory was not easily accessible to the larger public, or to anybody and everybody who wanted to do theory. Now, as against 1980s moment of theory, when theory was fashionable and controversial, in 1990s and 2000, that means about 10 years, 12 years ago. So that phase was described as hour of theory. And what was meant by the phrase hour of theory? It was a phase when theory ceased to be the exclusive domain of the minority universities, the scholars, the people, and enters the intellectual bloodstream. And this, when I refer to these two phrases, that is moment of theory and hour of theory, and when I also mention the time as to 1980s and 1990s and 2000, I do not see India anywhere in the picture, because uh, uh, let me just let you all know right at the beginning, most of the theories most of the theories either come from France or from Germany. Terry Eagleton, in the book that I just referred to, he says even English people waited and waited and waited for a very long time for theories to come from France to England. So if English waited for theories to come for so many years, then I'm sure India would have to still wait for theories to come. So therefore, if R of theory arrived in 1990s and 2000s, in India it must have come still a little later. So therefore, as a student, when I was studying literature in the same college in 2007 and 10, 2007 and 10, that's just about 13 years ago, I did not have the paper called literary theory. I did not have the paper literary theory. That means even in 2007 and 10, the 3 years, even then, this paper literary theory was new to Indian universities. Maybe in some elite premier institutions it had come, but to smaller institutions, smaller places, it had still not come. That means still, even in 1990s and 2000, still it was moment of theory in India. Probably it had become hour of theory in everywhere all around the world, or many places in the world, but it was still moment of theory in India. Now in 2020, whether it is hour of theory in India is still debatable, because still many places they don't have this paper except for probably some PG, but in UG still they don't teach this paper. So as and when this theory enters into as many places as possible, and smaller places more importantly, then it would cease to be moment of theory and it will continue to become hour of theory. So these are the two things, and it's very important to understand as we go ahead with this. Now, the origin of the word theory, and what exactly it means. The word theory comes from the Greek word theoria, meaning to contemplate, to speculate, look at, and to see. It means to look very closely at the text. Now, those words there about contemplate, speculate, and look at, and to see, these are all talking. They are very kind of words which are associated with the self. Nobody else can contemplate for you. Nobody can speculate for you, but you have your own speculations. You can contemplate for yourself. What you see is not something that the other may see, and what you look at may not be seen by somebody else. So it's very much internal to the self, an individual. Now, why am I emphasizing on an individual? Because let me come back to these words just by looking at means to look very closely at text. Now, here when I mean text, when I say text, it does not refer to the books. It does not refer to the reading material that you have. It could mean anything. It can mean anything because if you are sort of doing theory, you can interpret, you can look at anything that's visible to you and sort of begin to contemplate, begin to speculate, look at and begin to see. Therefore text, it can also it can mean movies. Okay, it can mean plays that you see. It can also mean somebody who is singing. It can also mean somebody who is dancing. That can also culture is very much part of theory. So therefore, so speculate, contemplate, look at, and see. I said it's very much associated with an individual because what you see in a particular text need not be seen by the other person who is probably your very close friend, but he need not see what you see in the text, or what your speculations need not correspond with your friend's speculation or your classmates speculation or your father's speculation, your mother's, your brother's, your sister's speculation. They are very different. What you see in a particular thing is seen very differently by another person. Now how would I relate that to literature? Now let me give you an example. Take a poem. A poem could be interpreted in as many ways as the number of people in a group or in a classroom. As many people, because if there are about 50 people in a classroom, same poem can be interpreted differently in 50 different ways by those 50 different people. Only requirement would be they would be honest in looking at it from that critical point of view. So therefore, that's why theory is very very integral part of an individual. It's not something that is outside of you. It's very much part of you and every individual. So therefore, and now I think one batch of your students I also taught general English. I would always say, so therefore, I just give you an example of a poem, but it need not be restricted to poem alone. It can also be restricted to a particular novel. It can be it can go to see a particular cultural act, a custom, a tradition. You can look at it very differently, and as I understand, nobody is right, nobody is wrong there. Whatever you see is right because theory is personal, it's individual. It cannot be outside. Now, that's the first point in the origin of the word theory. It is a study of production of meaning in text, its distribution and reception. So, theory also studies how a particular text gets that meaning which is very closely associated with it, how that meaning is distributed among people, and how do people receive that meaning. Therefore, there is a problem with all of this. Like, for example, meaning is generated out of a particular text. Let me give you an example of the poem Ulysses. If you take the poem Ulysses and randomly go in a class and ask the students to read the poem Ulysses and ask them what do you understand, and invariably everybody would say it's a quest of a man to have new experiences, explore the world. These are the possible answers you will get. Most of the students would give that answer. Now the question is, how did they arrive at that meaning, or how did this group of students who were given that poem to interpret impose that meaning onto that particular text? That's what theory will study. Now, how is that particular meaning at which the group of students have arrived, that would be distributed among everybody? That's the second thing that theory will study. And how do people receive? And there's a problem also with reception because not everybody would accept that particular meaning that is imposed by that group of students, because they would say it's nothing to do with a man who is in quest or search for new experiences. It's nothing to do with a man who wants to explore the world. It's only a story of a greedy man. Probably somebody would come up with that. So therefore I said, what meaning you impose on a text need not be accepted or received by everyone favorably. Okay, people can differ. So that's to do with the origin. The definition, this is a very simple definition. Literary theory is the organized, systematized analysis of literary text. Okay, so it's a very systematic analysis of a literary text. So therefore, when you sort of interpret or speculate a text, you should have a strong backing in one of the tools that would be provided to you all. You cannot randomly, you cannot make sweeping statements. Yeah, you cannot make sweeping statements. When I say sweeping statements, for example, kind of sweeping statements that we are used to making. If we say uh, William Shakespeare is the greatest writer of all, writers of all times, then you should have a backing for it. From where did you, not reference, I'm not asking reference, but how do you make that claim? And if you can support that particular statement by using one of the tools that will be given to you. But whether he is really the greatest of all times, that we'll have to prove. If you are not able to prove, that means you are making a very general kind of a sweeping statement without any basis. There is no foundation to it. You're randomly making or a fantasy kind of a statement. That's not a literary theory, or that's not theory. So it will make a systematized analysis of literary text. Now this and the institution of literature. Okay, institution of literature is now not everything. What does it mean? This phrase, institution of literature. Not everything is considered to be literature. There are particular texts only, or if you all have heard, canon. So this particular things which fit into the canon would be called literature. Those things which do not fit into that particular canon, or the parameters or the framework that is designed, then that particular work will not be considered as literature. And therefore you have something called the institution of literature, or already the boundaries are set. And if you want your work to fit in those boundaries, then you will have to follow certain rules and regulations. For example, Matthew Arnold came up with something called a touchstone theory. He said, now what was this touchstone theory? He said, if a particular work has to be accepted as a piece of literature, then it should meet certain guidelines, or it should meet certain standards. He said, and who gave the framework? He himself gave the framework. He said, these are the rules and regulations, standard rules and regulations. If your work meets these standard rules and regulations, then your work can be considered as literature. It can fit into something called that institution of literature. If your work does not meet that standard guidelines, then your work falls apart, and therefore it cannot be included as in the institution of literature. So therefore, in the literary canon that is formed, there is a lot of debate, because why this particular person is included, why that particular person is not included, so many reasons. Otherwise, when you take up their books and read, they are good writers, but they are not. Like very simple example to understand this institution of literature probably would be some of the recent writers that we have in India, probably after 2010. When I talk of them, I don't disregard their work, but that's how it is perceived by uh, big groups of people. For example, Ravinder Singh, I think, and Durjoy Datta, to some extent Chetan Bhagat. These are people, they call their work as pulp fiction. It's not even called literature. It's called pulp fiction. So you can't sort of place them along with somebody like Amitabh Ghosh, because his work is considered to be highly falling in line with those guidelines of literature. So that piece of work, Amitabh Ghosh, is any work you pick up, and that would be coming into that parameters of institution of literature. But the authors that are referred to, their work would not be considered as literature, and because probably they don't fall in that. Okay, now I have been constantly talking of literary theory, and that's the title of the paper, Introduction to Literary Theory. Now, this is opposed to something called cultural theory. And what's the difference between the two, literary theory and cultural theory? So, literary theory, I told you, it's a systematic study of the text, or looking very closely, systematically looking at the text very closely. Now, cultural theory studies art forms, films, the superhero comic books, sports, fashion, all cultural practices of which literature is just a very small part. So, cultural theory is a bigger area into which literature is a very small, tiny part. In a way, when you say we have a cultural studies paper, that would more or less also have literature as one small part. But cultural theory would also study art forms like dance, singing, and all that I said. Films it would study. You have this not just superhero comic books. You also have comic strips in the newspapers, which people take up and make some study. That's part of cultural studies. Then sports people begin to study those. Fashion with regard to your dressing, with regard to your hairstyling, and all this kind of things, they are part of cultural study, cultural theory. So there's this difference between literary theory and cultural theory. Cultural theory is a bigger area which also includes literary theory in it. So it's a small area. Literary theory is a small area which is a very small part of the cultural theory. uh, it's 11:35. If anybody has questions, you may please ask now. We have one or two small things to do. Anybody has any questions? You may put up in the chat box, or you may unmute yourself and ask questions. So far, is everything clear? Yes, Sarosha has asked to record. Yes, I am recording that. Anything? Anybody has any doubts so far?
No, sir.
Ashwati, no questions, no doubts.
No, sir.
Okay, fine. Then we shall just go ahead. So that was to do with cultural theory. The next one is, what does theory do? So that in the previous slide we just saw the difference between literary theory and cultural theory. Now we are coming back to literary theory, and what does it actually do? Theory speculates meaning making, that I have already discussed. I told you it discusses as to why a particular meaning becomes dominant, and why is a particular meaning enforced onto a particular text, and why not any other meaning. Practices of representation, social structures, films. It is not random fantasizing. Okay, it's not random fantasizing. Let me just explain and give you an example for that. Now let me take the poem that you all had, I think. No, did you all have anybody? Did you all have the poem "Strange Meeting"? Did you all have the poem "Strange Meeting"? Okay, Saurabh has asked a question here. Sir, if literature is part of cultural theory, then why literary theory is opposite to cultural theory? When I use that particular heading, opposite to cultural theory, I did not mean like it stands in opposition, but how it is different. That probably should have been the word. How it is different from cultural or literary theory. It's not opposite to cultural theory. It's different from cultural theory. How is literary theory different from cultural theory? Did you all have the poem Strange Meeting? Anybody, one of you can
No,
unmute and
sir.
answer, man. No?
No. No, sir. I
What
don't
poem?
think so.
What poem did you all have in the last 2 years, either in English major or in general English?
So we didn't have a poem named Strange Meeting.
Okay. Any other poem did you all have? I'm
Money
sure in the
Madness?
last Money Madness, Money Madness. Okay, that was in general English. So Money Madness. Now this is an example just to explain the term. It's not random fantasizing. Now Money Madness, D.H. Lawrence's poem would basically speak about the role of money in the contemporary world. Okay, and now as I said, theory speculates meaning making practice, meaning making. Now, how is that particular meaning, the meaning that I am trying to impose onto that particular text of D.H. Lawrence's poem that Money Madness speaks of the role of money in the contemporary world? Actually, it is me who is imposing that meaning. Okay. Now somebody cannot randomly come and say that this particular poem speaks uh, of D.H. Lawrence's love for money, or he being an extremely greedy man. He can. I am not saying if somebody makes that particular argument is wrong. It's right. But how good will you sort of provide logical theory to that particular argument would decide whether that meaning would be accepted and then distributed and then accepted. Because if you randomly make some statements, like for example only I'm giving that this particular poem speaks of the greed of the author or the poet, it's a good statement, but do you have enough ammunition to back that statement? And if you say this particular statement I make, argument I make, and I have enough tools to sort of support that argument, you're right. There's nothing wrong in that. Okay, but if you are not able to, if you are unable to back your statement or your argument with enough theory, then it becomes a sort of random fantasizing. The other example that I was taking of was of William Shakespeare being the one of the, not one of the, is the greatest writer that the world has ever seen. If you can provide enough arguments, logical arguments for that particular statement, it can still stand strong, and people would also accept that particular. It would be distributed among people and also received. But if you do not have an argument, logical argument for that, then it would fall flat, and it wouldn't. It would neither be distributed nor would be accepted by people. So that is what theory does. It speculates how meanings are generated, practices of representation that we would come when we actually talk of feminism, because how a particular gender is presented or represented, and who gives the authority to represent somebody. Social structures, society, that is why one particular group of people is more pure than the other, or why a particular group of people are supposed to do the odd jobs in the society. So social structures, and films also, films in terms of how they make representations and how they project people and things. So that is the first part. Speculation. Now this speculation which you do in theory should have quantifiable effects of words and practices. It's also reflection of how these practices work. How a particular text gets its meaning is what we see in theory, or that's exactly what theory does. So you make a particular statement, theory would basically help you to provide you to make your argument strong. Or when you make a particular statement, you would say these are the points that I provide to make my argument strong. Okay, as and when we come across, we will look at that. This is one example. This is only one example. Theory shows how one meaning precedes over the other. This is again same thing what theory does. The task of the theory is to explain process of rejecting or marginalizing one meaning in favor of another. So you have, I told you, 50 students in a class are given one particular poem and then asked to interpret that poem. 50 students come up with 50 different interpretations. Now, you can not everybody would agree to all 50 interpretations. You may pick up about 5 to 6 which you would think are very appropriate. Now, theory will explain why these 5 6 interpretations are much closer to being right, and why the rest other 44 of them are not very appropriate. I'm not using the word wrong, they are just inappropriate. So therefore, theory does that job of why a particular meaning is marginalized and why a particular meaning is taken into consideration. However, the meanings of any text are never final. That I think you all should know, because the text that was written somewhere in around 14th century could be interpreted or cannot be interpreted by a person in 20th or 21st century the same way, because the experiences of the person in the 14th century when he wrote were entirely different, and the experiences of the person reading in the 21st century are very different. So text can have multiple interpretations, and also meanings can also change over a period of time. Money Madness that we read today may not be relevant maybe 2 3 centuries later, or may altogether get a new meaning. So that also is possible. There was one example that I had to give you all. That's let me give you this example and then close. Uh, when we as we go discussing this paper, we will come across one particular theory. It's called uh, uh, practical criticism. It's called practical criticism. And practical criticism, you have this John Ransom Crow, a person. You also had Ferdinand Saussure just after him, who would say, now what did Saussure do actually? He went to a classroom. This is a nice way to explain how different poems can be interpreted differently. He went to a classroom and then he distributed poems among students. And he asked them, there were two things that he did not give to the students. First, he did not give them the name of the author, so that uh, the whole idea of that you should know the biography of the author who has written the poem was removed. Secondly, he did not give them the timeline or the background of the poem, so historical importance also was taken away. So two things that were removed: one was the biography of the author, second one was the significance, the historical significance of the text was taken. And students were asked to interpret that particular poem without having the name of the author and the poem. And to his shock, the students came up with so different interpretations that the real meaning, or actually the appropriate meaning that Saussure had been thinking until then, was not even thought by one student. So that's exactly how it happens. So probably the many poems that we study in our day-to-day course, if we give that poem to you without letting you know who the author is, and without giving you the historical background of that particular poem, and in today's context no net available, how are you going to interpret a particular text? So what do? You only look at the poem, the words, and then begin to interpret. So therefore there was a phrase that came up with them. It was said, words on a page. So you will have to, or you would have to interpret only words on the page and nothing else. So that is one example. And so therefore they also argued that it was more objective. Probably yes, but it leaves out a lot of other things. There are a lot of there are a lot of objections to that as well. But anyways, we'll see that when we study. Uh, so that's all for today. We are done exactly 11:46 by my watch here. If anybody has any questions, I can answer them, or I can try to answer them. If you all don't have any questions, then we may slowly leave. Anybody has any questions? You can either ask them or you can put them in the chat box. Okay, I think there are no questions. Serena says no question, nothing.
No
Okay,
questions.
no questions. Ashwati says yes.
Sir,
Badriya.
will you be explaining more about practical criticism?
Yeah, that is the one theory in total. Probably around 2 classes I'll be taking on that. This was just to give you
Okay.
an example only.
Okay. Okay. Thank you,
Okay,
sir.
yeah. Okay. All right. Then, if in case you all have any questions, you can ask me in the next class as well. Not a problem. So, thank you, and see you all in the next class.
Sir, will you be
Yeah.
putting up the recorded session in the
Yes.
portal?
Yes. Yes. I will do that. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you,
All
sir.
right. Yeah. See you all. Bye.
See you, sir. Bye.